Welcome. Today, in lesson 14, we're putting everything together. So today, it's basically a review lesson. So let's see how to apply everything. So here we want to find the interval of increase, decrease, and then where the function is constant. So let's begin by trying to scan the graph from left to right, and then we'll identify as we go. So here, as we begin to scan from left to right, we see that this is going to be an increase. Okay, and here, the interval of increase, let's go ahead and highlight it in green. Alright, so now as we extend to the right, we see that now we go under a decrease. And let's go ahead and highlight that in red. And finally, once we get to this endpoint, we see that we get a jump, and now the graph remains constant. So let's go ahead and highlight that one in blue. So let's begin drawing those splits here. So I'm going to get the interval of increase first. So since here I have an arrow on the left, we see that the x-axis is going to approach negative infinity since we're going to the left. And the interval of decrease here is going to be from negative infinity all the way to negative 3. So here we have parentheses negative infinity all the way to negative 3 in bracket because we have a closed circle here. Let's go ahead and write the decrease in interval notation as well. So here I noticed that our decrease begins at negative 3, but I already used up negative 3 for the interval of increase. So instead of putting it in, so if I want to include it in my interval, instead of putting it in brackets, I'm going to have to put it in parentheses. So I'm going to begin here at negative 3, and now we have to see where that decrease comes to an end. And we see that the decrease comes to an end right here at positive 3. So here we have a closed circle, so we're going to draw a bracket on positive 3. And now all that's left is the constant interval. So for the constant interval, we see that it's going to begin at positive 3, open circle, and then since we have an arrow here, the x-axis is going to approach positive infinity. So here we're going to have parentheses positive 3 and infinity with the parentheses. And these are the intervals that we were looking for. Let's try this again. So let's take a look at this example now. So let's begin from left and let's start scanning to the right. So as we begin scanning to the right, we see that we're going under a decrease. So let's highlight this in red. And then now once we extend to the right, now the function is neutral or constant. So let's highlight this part in blue. Once we reach this end, you see that we go through a jump, and now this time the function is increasing. So let's highlight this in green. The final thing to do is to express the intervals using interval notation. So let's begin with the decrease first. We have an arrow on the left, and on the left we can see that the x values, if they keep on extending forever, they will reach negative infinity. And then on the right hand side where the decrease ends, we see that it's going to end here at negative 2. So then the interval of decrease is going to be from negative infinity, parentheses, and then negative 2 in bracket because we have a closed point or a continuous portion of the graph getting cut. Next up is this constant portion of the graph. So here it's constant from negative 2, but remember we already used bracket negative 2, so now here we are forced to use parentheses negative 2, and the constant interval ends right here at positive 4, and there's an open circle, so the 4 is going to be closed with the parentheses. Let's do the green interval now. So here we can see that we have a closed circle beginning at 4, so we can use a bracket 4, and the interval is going to end, well, we actually have an arrow, so this keeps on extending towards positive infinity. So the upper bound is going to be infinity. And this is the set of intervals we were interested in obtaining from the function. So let's do one last example. So let's begin on the left, and as we scan to the right, we see an interval of decrease. So we're going to highlight this in red. Next, we look at the graph and we see that now it's constant. So we're going to highlight this area in blue. This time we don't have a jump. The function kind of just restarts here at this point. So now we can see that we have an interval of increase from 7 to 8. So let's draw this in green. Now we see that again it's constant, so let's highlight in blue. And finally we have a decrease, so we're going to go ahead and highlight the final part in red. Now beginning with the decrease, we see that we have two areas, so we're going to have to use a union. So let's begin by grabbing the first piece here, which is going to be from -5 all the way to -2. That's the decrease here. -5, -2, and we're going to use brackets. We have closed circles on both ends. Now we're going to write union and get the second portion. So here I'm going to be a little strategic, since I explicitly drew the closed circle with the blue area. I'm going to write the 11 with a parenthesis. So here, this is from 11 to 12, but again, since the 11 portion is kind of stuck with this blue portion, the 11 belongs to blue, so 11 I'm going to draw it in parentheses. So here, this is going to be union parentheses 11, 12 in the bracket. Alright, let's go ahead and grab the constant intervals now. So for the constant interval, we also have two portions. Let's begin with this one, and we can see that it begins at -2, but remember the -2 belongs to red, so I'm going to have to write the -2 in parentheses. So -2, and then this interval ends at +3 right here, and we can use a bracket here due to that closed circle. So we have -2, 3 bracket. We're going to write union, and here the next piece begins at 8, but 8 belongs to green, so I'm going to write union parentheses 8, and it ends at 11. So 11 with bracket because we had that closed circle here. Alright, finally we can get the interval of increase, and that's just singular. So let's go ahead and mark that. So we can see that the interval of increase begins here at 7. So let's mark that here. So we have 7 and then to 8. And then 7 and 8 both belong to green, and they're both closed circles, so we can write it as 7 bracket, or bracket 7, comma 8 in brackets as well. And these would be all of the correct intervals.